Kia ora, Mr Chair, thank you very much. I want to acknowledge the debate we've had in the House on this important bill. We've talked about the good, the alcohol interlocks, the common sense changes. We've talked about the missing, the 0.5 blood alcohol level. But something missing from this debate and something missing from the Safer Journeys document is the single most effective thing we could do to actually reduce the road toll in New Zealand is to take cars off the road. It's simply to give motorists an alternative, a real alternative to driving. I'm talking about better buses, better trains, walking, safer cycling. With oil at $2.19 a litre, at the petrol at $2.19 a litre at the moment, the most expensive it's been in New Zealand's history. I got to ask the Finance Minister, where is the plan? Is the government even planning to reduce our dependency on oil? And I got a no. What the Minister said is, look, Kiwis are smart, they've got alternatives, they'll respond to those market signals and find the alternatives. But I want to ask the Minister, what does this bill, what did Safer Journeys do, what is his government doing to actually give Kiwi motorists realistic alternatives? Because what I'm seeing is regional railways potentially closing across the country. I'm seeing railway station closing in Wellington. I'm seeing $10.7 billion spent.
Order. Can I just remind the member, this is a debate. You're not about railways. It's quite specific, and when we're in committee stages, we must focus on part one of the bill and not extend beyond that. Gareth Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I guess what I was doing was bringing in the broader transport context, because the most effective thing we could do is take cars off the road. I want to read, Mr Chair, briefly from our submission to Safer Journeys, which mentioned what we should be doing to actually make our roads safer, which isn't in part one of this bill. What we were endorsing was lowering the speed limits from 80 to 90 k zones. We would have increased the adoption of lower speed limits in urban arterials and increasing the effectiveness of speed limits. In Safer Journeys, we talked about cycling and the need for the 1.5 campaign and supporting that. In a nutshell, Mr Speaker, this bill has a whole bunch of common sense parts into it, but it misses on the 0.5 blood alcohol limit, and it misses the whole point, the most effective thing we could be doing to save motorist lives on the road, to save those potentially 400 to 600 people dying every year annually in New Zealand as a result of air transport pollution, and also, as we read in the Dominion Post last week, pretty tragically the impact on premature births from living near motorways. We need to be doing more.
Mr Chair. The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Chair, I just thought I'd rise and take a short call. A couple of things I've omitted to do earlier. One was to thank and acknowledge the Honourable Peter Dunn, who's had a bill on raising the driving age in this House for a couple of years now. And he, of course, has indicated his support for these measures. Also like to thank the support of the majority of the ACT Party members. And surprisingly, I find myself on the same side as the Greens, at least until Mr Hughes had his second speech, and then things sort of diverted once again. But, Mr Chair, I just thought I'd raise an issue of consistency for the Labour opposition, because on Thursday, April the 15th, 2010, the Labour leader told NZPA that his party's 43 MPs would back the law change to lift the age from 15 to 16. And that's quite interesting. So what we're seeing today is possibly a bit of a revolt against the leader's direction in that regard. You can check the NZPA story by all means, Mr Jones, but I suppose my question for the opposition, because they've been flipping around on this one and flopping around, or at least some of them have, we're not sure what the leader still thinks, that perhaps they might like to make up their minds and join the evidence-based solution before they get a chance to vote on this part, because they do have to be aware that their leader said that he would support it. So if they vote against it, or vote in favour of their own SOP, then I suppose it has to qualify as a little bit of a slap in the face for the leader and a bit of a revolution. And I suppose that's a judgment for the senior Labour members in the House to make, and fair enough that they should do that. So I do think they probably need to make a careful decision around this SOP before they dive in. Thank you, Mr Chair.
I call Sue Moroney.